This is Sally Kohn with the Women's Media Center, and I'm talking to Rinku Sen, Executive Director of the Applied Research Center. Rinku, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
I should also note that Rinku is a graduate of the Women's Media Center Progressive Women's Voices program, right?
Yep, proud graduate.
Proud graduate, there you go. Rinku, you think a lot about race.
I do, every day.
Do you think most Americans think about race a lot?
I think they do, but they don't know that they are. So I think that race and racial bias is so embedded into our lives, racial hierarchies, a racial divide, segregation. It's so embedded into our lives that it affects really just about everything that we do, everything we relate to. But because there's such a reluctance to bring that into the open, many people have a kind of blinder on. So even while they're having the experience, they don't know that it's a racialized experience.
Now, I've experienced a number of people who are very willing, men and women, mostly we're talking white people because I only know white people, men and women who are willing to admit that sexism still exists in the world. In fact, readily admit it, but yet deny the existence of racism. Do you think that's right, and how do you square that circle?
Well, I certainly wouldn't deny that sexism still exists in the world. It definitely does. I just think that we have a tendency to want to live out our aspirations, and so what I applaud in that phenomenon is white people wanting to move beyond racism. I think it would be much worse if they didn't want to, but I think that no fantasy is going to save us from the realities that we have to deal with every day, and racism is a reality that affects the lives of white people as well as the lives of people of color. And so it may not be relevant to white people in quite the same way that it is for communities of color, but there are ways in which it sneaks into your life, and I would encourage white folks to be open to acknowledging those ways.
All right, let's stop talking about white folks. Let's talk about the media. Oh, wait, the white folks run it. All right, but seriously, how do you think the media, you engage in the media as both a critic and a participant, how do you think the media constructs images around race in general, and particularly around women of color? How does it currently, and how could it be better?
Well, I think that the media, many parts of the media vilify women of color. I think we are portrayed largely as freeloaders, as people who occupy more of the slut end of the spectrum than the Madonna end, more of the whore end. And that, in other places we're seen as just like baby-making machines and not very responsible. So I think that those images certainly don't speak to the women of color that I know, and I know a lot, just like you know.
No, I don't know. I know Rinku. All right, yeah.
Women of color. So the real lives of women of color are very complicated, and the real personas of women of color are full of agency and heroism and dedication to family and community and to justice. And I think that outlets like the ones that the Women's Media Center supports and colorlines.com, where I work, that's our job, is to reconstruct that image of women of color and of women in general, and to draw as many viewers and readers and listeners to that image as possible.
Excellent, thoughtful answer. Now I'm going to give you a silly question to answer, all right? Go ahead, pick one out. Yeah. Oh, way to go deep. All right. Read it out to folks and answer it.
Who is my favorite famous woman of all time? Okay, well, lately, my favorite famous woman of all time is Cleopatra, because I just read Stacy Schiff's wonderful biography of her, and I learned some things in that biography that I did not know that made me really, really become a huge Cleopatra fan.
Such as?
So, the biggest thing I learned is that Cleopatra was not beautiful. She was not physically considered beautiful. All the people who wrote about her in her contemporaries, none of them talked about her beauty. What they talked about was how deeply, fantastically, incredibly smart she was, what a great administrator of kingdoms she was, what a wonderful strategist she was, and how curious she was about all of the people around her so that she could charm you. Her seductive qualities were in her ability to relate to people and to draw them out and to engage them in conversation and social discourse. And so she became a huge heroine for me after I read that book, because I think that, you know, women who work in politics, women who try to make changes in the world, we are often having to negotiate the sexualization of our image, of our power, and the idea that the person who is known as, you know, among the top 3, top 5 most seductive women in the course of human history
Was in fact just smart.
was in fact just smart, and smart about her smartness, about how she used her smarts and how she developed them. That was incredibly validating for me.
Okay, so Rinku, I want to thank you for joining me on this special racial justice edition of Book Notes on C-SPAN. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you so much. And thanks to the Women's Media Center.